Hello and welcome. I'll just wait a few seconds for people to come online. So hello and welcome, and whilst I'm waiting for people to come online, please let me know which part of the world you are joining me from today. Oh, hi, Barbara from London. It's great to have you here. So those, as you join, just let me know in the comments which part of the world you're joining me from today. Hi, Yolanda from South Carolina. It's always great to see where people are joining from. Hello, Minu from Boston and Sonia from Michigan. It's great to have you all online and welcome. And I'm going to get going now. Oh, hi, Ivona. Great to have you on here. So did you know that the way that most meetings are conducted don't allow you to be yourself if you are introverted? And as a result of this, you're often at a disadvantage even before you've walked in the room. However, it doesn't have to be like that, and you can create your own advantage. And in this live session, I will tell you how. So welcome to How to Confidently Speak Up in Meetings for Introverted Leaders. And when I was doing my research, looking at how introverted women leaders experience belonging and psychological safety in the workplace, meetings were probably the most psychologically unsafe environment in the workplace for them. And there are a number of challenges that people experience, introverted people experience in meetings, and are often told, oh, you need to speak up more in meetings by people who don't understand introversion and think that people should just be speaking for the sake of speaking. That's something that I used to get told back in the day when I was a leader in an organization. Oh, you should speak up more in meetings and tell people about what your group's doing. But I used to think to myself, if I had something of value to add, then I will speak. How many of you can relate to that? Let me know in the comments. And also share in the comments what your biggest challenges are when it comes to meeting as well. And I will try and make sure that I cover that if I've not already included it in what I'm going to be covering today. So what I'm going to be covering is why meetings are a challenge for people who are introverted, how to give yourself an advantage so you put yourself in the best possible position to speak up confidently, and looking at how you can speak up in meetings as your best self. So why are meetings challenging for introverted people? And please share your thoughts and comments in the comments as well. And the reason why they're a challenge are that the way that they are conducted don't allow for people who are introverted to give their best response. So the way that most meetings are conducted are you are put on the spot and you're expected to respond straight away, whereas people who are introverted have a preference for thinking and processing information before they speak, whereas people who are extroverted have a preference for speaking and then processing the information whilst they're speaking. And that's why you often find that in meetings, people who are introverted may not say a lot, but then when they do speak, they say something which is meaningful and adds value. And, you know, if you start to reflect on the different personalities around a table in a meeting, you may notice that people who are extroverted may say a lot, but it may take them a while to get to the crunch of what they're saying. I once had a client who was a director, and she said to me that she wished she could be like her extroverted colleagues who just speak off the cuff and they just speak so confidently. And when I asked her when we started to unpick what she meant by that, it turned out that her extroverted colleagues spoke a lot. And when I asked her, well, what are they actually saying? And she reflected on it and she said, well, they're not really saying a lot until it takes them ages to get to the point of what they're saying. And so then I asked her, well, why do you want to be like that? And she thought about it and she said, well, I don't. I just want to find a way in which I can speak up, which feels authentic. And that's why the meetings are conducted in a way that don't allow that processing of information and speaking. When I was carrying out research for my book, Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman, I came across some research that said if organizations were measured, their performance was measured on how they are in meetings, most of them would go out of business. So that's why you may find that it's uncomfortable speaking up in meetings. And you may find that because you are maybe worrying about that, it makes you feel anxious. And then when you feel anxious, it makes it even harder for you to speak up, because you are either not going to speak up because you're feeling anxious about it, or you speak up, but because you're feeling so anxious, it then you don't perform at your best. You get performance anxiety. It's called performance anxiety, where you become anxious about speaking up and talking in a meeting or performing in a meeting. And so those on-the-spot responses, that when you get put on this response, that can make you feel even more anxious. And because you know you've been put on the spot and all eyes are glaring at you, and you may feel like you haven't got time to process what is being said, and that can fuel that anxiety. And you may find, as I mentioned, that your extroverted colleagues do speak more often, and that can be misconstrued as them appearing more confident because they speak more often. But sometimes what can happen is the people who are extroverted, they may speak more when they don't feel confident. So us introverts tend to speak less when we're not feeling confident, but whereas people who are extroverted sometimes may speak more when they're lacking confidence. So that's why you may find them a challenge. And if anybody's got anything else that they want to add, then please do type it in the comments. Anything else in terms of why you find them a challenge, add them in the comments. So in order to give yourself an advantage, it's all about thinking about it before you go into the meeting. And the first thing is about developing the right mindset. Many of us are very much led by our emotions, and the way that we think affects how we feel, and we act and behave according to how we're feeling. So if you're feeling anxious and you're worrying about it, that's likely to make you not want to speak up, or when you do speak up, because of how you're feeling so anxious, you don't speak up to the best of your ability. And so if you go into the meeting feeling anxious about it, or worrying about getting put on the spot and not having time to think, or anything like that is making you worry and feel anxious, then you're not going to be able to think clearly, and you're not going to be able to think rationally. So it's about challenging what you think and believe about yourself when you're going into those meetings, and looking at what your thoughts and beliefs are about yourself in this meeting, and changing what you think to something more helpful. Because if you can change what you think and believe, then you will change how you feel. If you change how you feel, you won't feel so anxious, and you'll feel more confident to speak up. And also, what I will share some techniques that will help you as well. And so when you are in the middle of the meeting, and say you get put on the spot and you haven't got time to sort of challenge what's going on in your mind or rationalize those thoughts, and then what you can do is just acknowledge your thoughts, acknowledge how you're feeling, but just tell yourself, I haven't got time to worry about this right now. I'll worry about it when I get home this evening. Right now, I'm just focusing on getting through this meeting. And that what happens when you do that, it allows you to bring your mind back to the present, because what is happening is you're worrying and your mind is ruminating and racing ahead, worrying about the worst possible outcome, worrying about saying the wrong thing, worrying about being put on the spot or whatever it is that you're worrying, and that's not allowing you to be present and in the moment. So by delaying the worrying in that way enables you to bring your mind back to the present so that you can focus on getting through the meeting. And before you go into the meeting as well, if you're feeling anxious, just check what's going on in your mind and challenge what you're thinking. We have so many thoughts a day. Often we don't stop and think about what we're thinking about, or whether what we're thinking about is real, whether it's accurate, or whether it's helpful. So it's about interrupting those thoughts and recognizing what's going on. Sometimes you notice the physiological symptoms before you notice what's going on in your mind. So if you're going into a meeting or you're in a meeting and you notice either a tension in your stomach or a tight knot in your stomach or tension in your shoulders or in your head, or your heart's beating faster, or wherever it shows up physiologically on you. So think about where, when you're feeling anxious or you're worrying about or something, or you're fearful about something that you've got to do, think about where it shows up on you in your body physiologically. And when you notice that sensation, then just pause and ask yourself, what is going on in my mind? What am I thinking here? And then just rationalize those thoughts. You might find it helpful to write down what you're thinking, and then write down corresponding words which are more helpful, which are more rational. And also ask yourself, well, what's the worst that could happen? And if that was to happen, what could you do? And once you get into the habit of practicing that, you'll start to recognize when you're thinking what you think and believe about yourself or the environment that you're in that is getting in the way. And the more you practice it, the more it's easier to recognize it's your thinking. And as I said, if you're in the middle of the meeting and you get put on the spot and you haven't got time to rationalize those thoughts, then just acknowledge them. Don't just dismiss them and push them out of your mind, because they will just keep bubbling up under the surface, waiting to explode. But acknowledge them, and allow yourself permission to worry about them later. Tell yourself, I will worry about them later. Right now, I'm focusing on getting through this meeting. And like I said, practice it and practice it and keep on practicing it, and becoming aware of when your thoughts are getting in the way of you feeling confident in meetings. And the next thing is about preparation, and preparation is key. And something I often find is that people are just so busy, they don't have time to prepare for meetings in advance. But that preparation in advance can set you up to be your best self in the meeting. So go through the agenda in advance and identify those topics of interest that you want to focus on, and then think about what it is that you want to say, what you want to object to, or what you want to add. And that way, by doing that in advance, you will have done a lot of that thinking before you step in the room. And by thinking about that, if you do get put on the spot, you will have done a lot of that thinking. So you'll be aware of what it is that you want to say and how you want to respond. Another thing that you can do in advance is, if there are particular topics that are going to come up in the meeting, another thing that you could do is seek the opinion of other people who are going to be at the meeting in advance. So you can gauge how the conversations are going to go, or if there's something that you know that you're particularly keen on or implementing, or an idea that you have and you're aware of how other people are going to object. By identifying that in advance, it enables you to prepare yourself, so that when you go in the meeting, you feel better prepared to speak and to challenge if you need to challenge, and to assert yourself. And also, if you get to the meeting early and get to have conversations with the people who are going to be at the meeting, that can help as well. By developing that rapport, it's sometimes easier when you know the people in the room to speak up confidently. And if you find that you do get put on the spot and you've not had time to process the information, let people know what your initial thoughts are, because I'm sure that you will have some initial thoughts about what's being discussed, and then just let them know that if you've got anything further to add, then you'll get back to them. Or if you can't think of anything, you're put on the spot and you can't think of anything immediately to say, just say, I will get back to you once I've had a chance to process the information, and then let people know once you've had a chance to process the information what it is that you want to say. And when it comes to virtual meetings, then you make use of the chat facility. The chat facility is really good for adding your thoughts after the moment has passed. So if something comes to mind, just typing it in the chat, either direct to the chair or the facilitator, or direct to everybody, to doing it openly. So make sure that you prepare beforehand and give yourself that time to prepare beforehand. So it might be the case that you, when you go through that, you set time in your calendar to prepare beforehand. If agendas are not being sent out in advance, because some people tell me they're not getting the agendas until they're actually going in the meetings or getting reports handed out in the meetings, then contact whoever it is who's responsible for organising the meetings and let them know that in order to be more inclusive, then people need to think about the different thinking styles in the room, and in order to help people who are more inclined to process information and then speak, just let them know that giving them the agendas and any reports in advance will enable them to make their best contribution. And if you are somebody that facilitates or chairs meetings, then you make sure that you're doing that for people, so that you are giving everybody an opportunity to be their best self and to speak in the meeting. And if you don't chair or facilitate the meetings that you go to that you find challenging, look at how you can influence change. So maybe have a word with the person that's chairing and facilitating the meeting, and let them know that how the meetings are being conducted do not allow people to be their best self. And so the final point I want to go on is about speaking up as your best self. And so being intentional about speaking up. And when I say be intentional, I don't mean just speaking up for the sake of speaking, because, that's not going to add any value, just speaking for the sake of speaking. And don't feel that you have to speak just for the sake of speaking, even though that's what you may see your extroverted colleagues doing. So be intentional and set yourself some stretch goals about how many times that you're going to speak up if you really find it a challenge, and how many times that you're going to maybe offer an opinion on something that you don't necessarily agree about. And by having those sorts of goals and objectives for what you want to get from meetings and challenging yourself in that way, it takes you out of your comfort zone. But then the more you step out of your comfort zone in that way, the more confident you'll become at it. So it's not a case of taking yourself too far out of your comfort zone into your distress zone, because if you do that, it will be too stressful and make you feel anxious. But it's about just challenging and stretching yourself just outside your comfort zone so that it feels uncomfortable, but not too stressful. And then the more you do that, the more you put that into practice, the more confident you will become. And as I mentioned, if you get put on the spot, just say what's initially on your mind, and then let people know if you've got anything further to add, you'll get back to them. Or if you even haven't got time to think about what your initial thoughts are, just letting people know that once you've had time to process the information, you will get back to them. Another thing is about being aware of and being aware of the dynamics in the room and play to your listening strengths. Introverts, we're well known as being good listeners. So play to those strengths and listen to what people are saying, and observe those non-verbal cues and the tones of voice so that you're ready to speak when someone is finishing. And you can often tell when someone's coming to the end of what they're going to say, because their tone of voice, they may start to slow down, they may become quieter. So be ready to step in when that person has finished. This may be harder for virtual meetings, particularly if people have got their camera off, and that's where active listening makes it easier to pick up when someone is coming to the end of what they're going to say. So listening actively to what people are saying and for the different tones in their voice that will give you an indication of when they're coming to an end of what they're saying, so that you have the opportunity to step in and speak. If you find that people are speaking over you, and then it's about being assertive and holding your ground and letting them know that you haven't finished speaking yet, and continuing to speaking assertively and firmly, so that they will recognize that you are still speaking, and that they aren't you're not going to allow them to speak over you. And when you're thinking about being assertive in that way, one analogy which I particularly like is by Randy Paterson, a clinical psychologist, who likens assertiveness to a stage. And he said that he says that people who are passive allow everybody onto the stage but themselves, and they're sat in the audience, and everybody else is on the stage but themselves. People who are aggressive want the stage for themselves, and they are pushing everybody else off. But people who are assertive recognize that there's room for everybody on the stage, so they're on the stage and everybody else is on the stage as well. And so if you in that moment feel that you are being spoken over, and just ask yourself, am I on the stage here, or am I in the audience? Is that person trying to put me off the stage? And then think about how you can have an adult to adult conversation. If you're aware of sort of transactional analysis, then have an adult to adult conversation, so that you are more likely to get an adult response from the person that you're speaking to. So I've got a question here. Let's have a look. What to do when someone keeps stepping on, interrupting, shutting you out when you finally do speak? So I hope having what I've just said there about being assertive and holding your ground is helpful. And you've got another question here. What if they don't stop? I mean, if they don't stop and you find that this is just going to get too out of hand, then it may be the case that you don't want to sort of cause a scene in the meeting. You don't want to sort of stoop to their level and cause a scene in the meeting, but afterwards have a conversation with them and let them know that their behaviour was rude and unacceptable. And then perhaps have a word with the chair as well, because the chair should be managing the meeting and making sure that those sorts of things don't happen. But if you are able to assert yourself and just say in a firm voice, firm assertive voice, I haven't finished speaking yet. When I finished, then you can have your say, and then just continue. But if hopefully by then somebody will not be so ignorant and carry on. But in the case that they are, then as I said, if you don't want it to sort of get messy or look unprofessional, then after the meeting have a word with them and just let them know that that behavior was inappropriate, and also speak to the chair or facilitator. So I think I've covered all that I want. So I've got a comment here, but if it's the chair that is difficult, and that is a good one, because yes, sometimes it can be the chair, and particularly if it is someone, what I find is where the person is more senior, that sometimes people may find that challenging having those conversations with them. But again, it's about after the meeting, if you're finding that after you've asserted yourself, they're continuing, having a conversation with them after the meeting and giving them some constructive feedback. So it's about managing upwards or managing that chair as well, giving them some constructive feedback and making it about their behavior. So not making it about them, but making it about their behavior and the impact of their behavior, and just let them know that, you know, the impression that it gives off and how that affects other people in the meeting as well. And hopefully that will have an effect. But then if it doesn't, it may be the case that you may want to look at, well, what other avenues are open to you. Is it a case that you maybe have a word with HR or someone who can have a word with that person if they are sort of being very disrespectful and rude in the meeting? Then, you know, it may be a case of that you have to look at some of the HR policies that your organization has in place. So those are my tips for speaking up in meetings. And has anybody got any questions before I wrap up? And so what I've covered, I've talked about why meetings are a challenge, how you can give yourself an advantage and put yourself in the best position before you go into the meeting. And another thing, if you are feeling very anxious when you're going into the meeting, and even during the meeting itself, is practicing some breathing exercises. So one thing which is called box breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds and hold for 4 seconds. That just helps to calm your breath, because when you are anxious, you start breathing more quickly, and then oftentimes you may find that because you're feeling so anxious and you're sort of breathing more faster, you just want to hurry up and get what you want to say out the way, and so you just rush it out quickly. But that can affect your confidence as well. But just by slowing your breath, calming your breath, that enables you to calm down, helps you to feel more relaxed, and then putting into practice what I've said about looking at your thinking and so forth, and challenging what you're thinking will help you to feel more confident about speaking up. And Catherine has said grounding exercises helps her as well. Yes, so practicing some grounding exercises, that can help as well. So that's it about giving yourself an advantage and speaking up as your best self. So hopefully now you'll be more clear about how you can speak up confidently in meetings. And before I go through the questions, I just want to tell you about the conference. If you're not aware of the very first conference that I'm putting on for introverted leaders on the 13th of September in central London. We've got a great lineup of speakers and sessions that you can attend. We've got keynote speakers. We've got a workshop by the LinkedIn team themselves who are coming down, and they'll be showing attendees the power of LinkedIn and how to use the platform to define your personal brand, how to use it to stand out, and why it's important to be a thought leader in your space. And there's so much more as well. And so if you want to attend and you haven't registered yet, if you go to introvertedleadersconference.eventbrite.co.uk, and if you use the promotion code LUNCHLEARN in capital letters, you get a 10% discount. And if your employer wants to arrange for 10 or more people to attend, group discounts are available. And the early bird discount ends today. So if you want to take advantage of that as well, then book before midnight today. So I've got a couple of questions here. Are there online sessions at this conference? Will it be virtual too for those who can't travel? Unfortunately, I'm not doing it because it's the first one. I'm not doing it virtually this year, but I'm hoping to make it a regular thing. And if it's something that I may consider about doing it virtual in the future. So I'll put in the chat the promo code and the link. Right, so that's in the chat now. We have got people coming from all over. I've got people traveling from New York, and up all across the UK for it. So, you know, if you're outside the UK, then and you fancy a visit to the UK, then would be lovely to see you there. Right, any questions before I go? Let me go through the comments and see if there are any questions. Right. Minu says, thank you for your tips. Breathing definitely helps me. Yes, breathing, that does make a big difference. All right, if there's no more questions, then thank you all for attending. I will go through the comments later to see if there's any questions that I've missed. Martha's saying some short clips on the comments would be appreciated. Yes, I will do that. I will make sure that some clips are taken of the conference. So Catherine is saying that, right, I've shared the link in the comments, but I'm not sure why you can't see it. I will go in after and put it, edit the post and add it. I'm going to put it here again. And remember, the early bird discount ends today. Right, so I've put it in again. There. But I will go and put it in the blurb to go with this. So there, put it up on the screen and hopefully you will have seen it. Right, so thank you everybody, and until the next time, bye. Catherine, yes, I've seen your comment about asking whether I can email it to you, and yes, I will email it to you. Okay, thanks. So thank you everybody, and goodbye.